features real-world conversations that leave you feeling happy and rejuvenated.
The following is a paid program and does not necessarily reflect the views of WSIC.
Well, welcome to Dollars and Cents, presented by North Main Financial. I'm your host, Joshua Dobi. Thank you so much for hanging with us here. 4 o'clock hour here on Thursday. If you're a 9-to-5er, you got 53 minutes and 40 seconds until you get to that finish line here at the end of your workday, and I appreciate so much you hanging with us here on Dollars and Cents as we give attention to, perhaps even spark some conversation regarding items of financial and economic importance. No lack of that today. I got a full list. It's going to be a busy hour, but we're going to have a little fun along the way as well. But you remember, as a previous listener to Dollars and Cents, that as we're talking about things, some in a positive light, some in a not so positive light. Unfortunately, I got some not so positive things, looking at some company challenges that have happened here in the last week or two. But in doing so, none of those are intended as specific recommendations for you, meaning that everybody's situation is unique. We strongly recommend that you reach out to your tax advisor, to your financial advisor, or if you'd like to reach out to us at North Main Financial Group, love to hear from you. Love to chat about your particular financial situation and to see if there are ways in which we might be able to be helpful to you. Online, you can find us at northmainfinancial.com. That's north like the direction, Main like the street, financial.com. We got a contact page on there. Leave us an email address, a phone number, let us know the most preferred and desirable ways for us to contact you, again, at northmainfinancial.com. All right, let's get into it. What's hot? This is the first segment here. I say segment. We do a significant amount of the program now with What's Hot. And it's probably because, well, there always are a whole lot of news stories, but I think a whole lot of relevant news stories as well. And it'd be hard for us to find one that was more impactful in my end of the universe here over the last week than what had happened with what was supposed to be a fairly innocuous update from a group called CrowdStrike, ticker symbol CRWD, Charlie Roger William David. Not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold CrowdStrike, but an update, a technological update. Now, you're talking to the wrong guy when you want me to get into the granular on this, but from my understanding, an update, CrowdStrike being a cybersecurity firm between them and Microsoft. And this was about almost exactly a week ago. It was just after actually last week's show that aired through the night on Thursday night of last week. And whatever happened, and I know there are some of you out there who are very gifted technologically, and you can use very intelligent sounding words compared to what I'm talking about here. But what it was, there was an update between CrowdStrike and Microsoft that just didn't go well. It was not a cyber attack. It was not something where there were bad actors that were breaking into the system, is our understanding, but rather just a breakdown in this update between CrowdStrike and Microsoft. And boy, did it throw a whole lot of things in a blender. And I don't have to tell you, boy, if you tried to fly, especially on Delta Airlines this past week, holy smokes. I mean, it was a mess. Airlines, banks, other financial institutions, retail outlets, stores, they couldn't process point of sale transactions for a couple of days. And for many folks who are just starting to get back online here a full week later in terms of their full capabilities. And for the airlines, they're still scrambling. Gosh, I traveled a couple of times this past week. It's never easy getting through Charlotte Airport right now because it's a hub, and there are basically everybody east of the Mississippi who's flying on American Airlines is probably going through Charlotte at one time or another. But holy mackerel, this past week, it just took it to another level. It was challenging. Number of flights canceled, many postponed, and others delayed. That really just threw the whole thing in a big blender. So big deal. I didn't mention Microsoft also obviously publicly traded. Mary, Sam, Frank, Tom. Not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Microsoft either, but they were really the recipient. So it was really their Windows program that was the recipient of this update from CrowdStrike, and it just didn't line up. Now, CrowdStrike has been very upfront talking about it, talking about their, again, I'm going to use some very unintelligent terms here, patch. Let's call it a patch to fix the issue. Been very upfront, very public in talking about how they're resolving it. And I think by and large they have. But boy, it certainly did throw things in a blender there. So big deal. Again, if you're not aware of it, I'm glad. It means you haven't had to bump into it for any reason. That's a good thing. But certainly, if you've been traveling at all or trying to buy some things, and although my understanding is it did not affect Amazon. And Amazon might be on a separate system of some kind. Again, I'm not the technology guy. I'm not sure about that. Amazon, Alpha Mary, Zulu, next. Not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold them, but it did not affect them because I guess it was just business as usual with their interface there. So kind of interesting stuff there when we talk about CrowdStrike and then with Microsoft. All right, let's we talked about airports here for just a minute. Let's talk airlines for a second. Some big news and with a couple of them here in Charlotte. Some pretty big news. If you fly JetBlue, so JetBlue, publicly traded company, it's Jeremy, Barbara, Louise Umbrella. So JBLU, not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold them. But they have reduced their service in Charlotte here over the last several years. They fly, their directs out of Charlotte were New York and Boston. And they dropped the New York one a couple of years ago. Just announced they're going to be dropping the direct flight to Boston here in a couple of months by the end of August. So if you are a JetBlue flyer, especially originating in Charlotte, that's going to impact you because they have several flights a week, and those are all going to be going away here in a couple of months. And it could be so. If you have a later reservation for a flight beyond August, definitely check with JetBlue, check with your travel agent to make sure that you can see if your flight's still there, and if it's not, you might be able to get that changed. But that's a big deal for Charlotte. And now, any number of reasons why that's the case. Airlines do that all the time. It's not necessarily an indication of bad things with JetBlue or with Charlotte. It's just that they've decided there's not enough profit, not enough money to be made in continuing that route from Charlotte, so they're going to be backing out of that. Let's stay on the airlines end of things theme here. Got to bring up a popular one, Southwest Airlines. They might have the best trading ticker out there. At least I like it a lot. And you probably know Southwest Airlines, a part of their logo is a heart. And so their ticker symbol is literally Lucy Umbrella Victor, LUV, love. Pretty cool, right? And if you're looking for ways to stand out, things that you remember, LUV for Southwest Airlines. Anyhow, they came out with what I would say is some pretty significant, a pretty significant announcement about how they're going to be managing their seating on their flights. If you've ever flown Southwest Airlines, you know they run things very differently. No first class on a Southwest Airlines flight, and they don't have zone seating, meaning it's basically everybody's getting a similar kind of seat. You get put into groups for boarding purposes, but there isn't necessarily an advantage or disadvantage of sitting in different seats. They're going to be putting that away, meaning there's no more open seating that's going to be on Southwest Airlines flights. They're going to look a lot more like the legacy carriers, like the Deltas, like the Uniteds, like American Airlines. Some interesting commentary on top of that. Basically, what they're saying is that Southwest is running a little bit behind, which is unusual. Southwest, for many years, has run a better profit model than the legacy carriers. And interesting that things are starting to slow down a little bit for Southwest. We can talk about that in terms of consumer spending. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show with some inflation data and spending data that came out here with GDP growth. But I thought that was very interesting to see that with Southwest, because that's been really one of their hallmarks. Literally for the last 50 years. That's been something that has really caused Southwest to stand out, and I think what has made them popular in terms of being an appeal to folks who are very loyal to Southwest. I know any number of folks. That's all they fly, and certainly if that's available to them, they really like doing that. So it'll be kind of interesting to see. At any rate, well, we're going to take a break here as we hear from our sponsors here on Dollars and Cents. Appreciate you hanging with us. Hang with us for a few more minutes as we come back here on WSIC.
More of Dollars and Cents with certified financial planner Joshua Dobi is coming up on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Well, it's been a bit of a soggy day across the Lake Norman area. Rain tapering off and drying out as we go into this evening. We're mainly dry but damp, warm and muggy, low to mid-70s in the overnight hours. Going into our Friday, we'll start out dry, temperatures back in the low and mid-80s, and our rain chance gets lower for only an isolated shower or pop-up thunderstorm. Weekend looking to be in good shape, mainly dry Saturday and Sunday with highs in the mid-80s. That's your forecast from the WSIC Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Chase Myers.
The WSIC app is available now wherever you get your apps, featuring local deals from great local businesses like Serenity Now Massage Therapy.
Here is your WSIC community calendar. Langtree Live continues their free music series on Thursday. 2 months ago, Ghostface Brewing and Waves Entertainment hosted the Battle of the Bands. The champion that night, Fortune 5, makes their Langtree Live debut this Thursday, July 25th. Come on out to Langtree Lake Norman to see and hear the Battle of the Bands champion, Fortune 5, this Thursday with music beginning at 7 p.m. The Live Under the Oaks concert series continues on Friday at Birkdale Village in Huntersville. Come enjoy the music of the Highway with their dynamic and high-energy show. Red Rocks will have beverages on site, and the Birkdale restaurants are ready for your dinner service. Bring your chairs and blankets for the Highway concert at Birkdale Village on Friday, beginning at 6 p.m. The 8th annual Dog Island Jam takes place this Saturday on Lake Norman. Star from The Voice, John Sullivan presents the summer's must-see concert. Waves Entertainment will bring a stage, sound system, and LED walls to, you guessed it, an island on Lake Norman. Sully and Friends headline the concert on Saturday. Untie your boat or call your friends with boats and enjoy the Dog Island Jam concert on Lake Norman this Saturday. The Cookout Summer Shootout Series at Charlotte Motor Speedway reaches the series finale. The 10-race series title night is on Tuesday, July 30th, with NASCAR night sponsored by the NASCAR Hall of Fame. See the champions crowned and the legends and bandoleros. Don't miss the next generation of racing superstars honing their skills and rising through the ranks. Gates open at 5 p.m. with the green flag waving at 6. Visit charlottemotorspeedway.com for tickets, details, and information. To keep up with all the events happening around the community and much more, including amazing local deals, download the WSIC News app today.
Call now to speak with certified financial planner Joshua Dobi at 844-STUDIO-4. It's dollars and cents on 105.9, 100.7 WSIC.
Hello and welcome back to Dollars and Cents presented by North Main Financial. I'm your host, Joshua Dobi. Thank you so much. Hanging with us here, second quarter football reference here on Dollars and Cents. Speaking of football, and producer Joe was just sharing this with me here. By the way, Joe Berg, Sports Report, is going to come up right after I'm done here at the 5 o'clock hour. Hang around. You're going to get all things national, regional, local, sports-wise from him. Make sure you listen to him. If there's somebody who's in the know, he's the guy. And he was just sharing with me about getting the start of football camp. You've been hearing me talk about that every week in terms of when football season's coming around here. A couple of guys already got ACL tears, and that has to be tough. Man, 2 days into it and already out for the season. That has to be brutal for that kind of thing. But as we say around here, especially when it comes to our Panthers, hope springs eternal, and so we're still optimistic. We have at this point, regardless of what the odds setters say, we have as much chance as anybody of winning the Super Bowl this year. That's exactly where I'm landing with it. So be on the lookout here. Panthers winning the Super Bowl. You heard it here first, which I think I heard on Good Morning OK, and the odds right now are 300 to 1. If that's the case,
they are the longest odds right now.
Okay, so that's not a lot of faith. I'm a little disappointed in our folks in Atlantic City and Las Vegas there, Joe, that's the case. But I mean, 300 to 1, you don't have to put much into it to really have nice payoff.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
that's the way I see it.
We should do that here. We should do it just station wide.
Station pool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll clean up as they do it. All right, let's get going here. Second quarter here on Dollars and Cents. Appreciate you hanging with us. We were talking about the airlines just as we were going into the break there, talking about JetBlue shutting down service out of Charlotte. Not a unique kind of thing, but unique from the standpoint that they've been flying direct flights out of Charlotte for about the last 20 years or so. So that's kind of noteworthy. And then on a national level with Southwest Airlines doing away with their open seating and becoming a lot more in that regard, like the legacy carriers, like Delta, like United, like American. So kind of interesting to see that. I would anticipate there's probably going to be some pushback from loyal Southwest flyers for that kind of thing. I think it's one of the reasons why that they have the loyal flyers that they do, is because Southwest is different in terms of how they manage passengers and loyalty programs and all that goes along with that. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see. All right, let's keep going here. So we've talked a little bit about airlines. Definitely have talked about football. You know what's coming next. Probably going to talk about food. All right, let's look at food here. Kellanova, which may not be a name that is very familiar to you yet, and I can completely understand that that may be the case, but it's a name that came out of a restructuring that involved a company that I'm certain is very familiar to you, and that's Kellogg's. Kellogg's, K is the symbol. It's one of those ones that has a single letter. Not too many of those out there. Single letter, K is in Kelly. Not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Kellanova, but they're hooking up with a group called Two Rivers Coffee. And I'm saying that not because Kellanova or Two Rivers Coffee necessarily high on your radar screen, but if you're a coffee drinker like me, what I'm going to say next is probably going to be somewhat meaningful to you here. And anyhow, the collaboration between Kellanova and Two Rivers Coffee, they're coming out with Eggo coffee. Yes, you're correct. When you say Eggo waffles, that is correct. So waffle flavored coffee coming out here in this collaboration. I mean, I'm a big coffee drinker. I literally drink it. As long as I'm awake, I drink coffee all day. So if you are an Eggo waffle kind of person, I mean, they're going to have the flavor. They're going to have maple flavor. They're going to have blueberry flavored. They're going to have strawberry. I mean, it's looking good. Couple months, it's sitting out there. So be on the lookout for it. Eggo flavored coffee coming from Two Rivers Coffee. You heard it here. Yeah, in terms of all things important on that end of things, but an interesting collaboration between Kellanova and Two Rivers. Let's keep on that food theme here on What's Hot. This one's big too. That came across my radar screen just as I was doing the research and preparation for today's show. And it's because of how popular they are. And certainly when you're looking at their model, profit model, frankly, as a publicly traded company, we were able to get a pretty deep into their data and to the analytic end of things. Very well-run company from an investment standpoint. Not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold them. This has just been true in terms of their profit margins. It's Costco. Costco, C-O-S-T, Charlie, Oscar, Sam, Tom. Not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Costco stock. But coming out with this was a little bit more than a week ago, actually now. Coming out with some notice about how they're going to be increasing their membership fees. So if you are one who is a Costco member, and I dare say many of you who are in the listening audience today probably are, I know that I am, as a Costco member, going to be increasing membership fees. First time in 7 years that they've increased their fees. Very interesting. There are several reasons why that's the case that were offered up by the CFO whenever the announcement was made. Certainly the higher cost of doing business, higher input costs, higher staffing costs, all that go along with that. The usual kinds of things that you hear whenever there's an increase in cost. But the first time in 7 years, there's going to be an increase in membership fees, and it looks pretty much across the board as I took a look at it, meaning from the entry-level fees, and they have some other VIP-level kinds of things as well, and looks to be pretty much across the board. They're going to be increasing those fees. So if you're a Costco member, make sure that you're paying attention to that. Now, if you also are a Costco member, yeah, I'm coming back to food here. Hold on. If you're a Costco member, perhaps more importantly, this would only apply, and this will only make sense to you if you've been to Costco or go there with some regularity. The hot dog special that they have towards the front of the store, price is not going up. Let me say that again. That's you heard it first here. WSIC. Actually, that's not true. It's not first here, but I may be the first person at WSIC to say it. The cost of the hot dog special not going up, still $1.50, and that's big. I mean, it's big for me anyhow, because while my wife and kids are scurrying around in Costco, you betcha, I'm having a $1.50 hot dog while I'm waiting for them to finish. And they're probably spending slightly more than $1.50 as they make their way through the store as well. That's an entirely different discussion, therapeutic in nature. We'll make sure that comes up in a separate show. All right, let's keep going here on What's Hot. Got some negative data. I mean, negative data in terms of what it's meaning with regards to the consumer. Now, I'm gonna back it up with some positive data, and then I'm gonna talk about the challenges of data. Don't get leery on me. I promise I'm gonna make it interesting here, because this sometimes can put you to sleep when we're looking at data kinds of things. But it's important to understand there's always positive and always negative data, and it's just a matter of what is taking the highest precedence or priority in terms of impact on our economy. So that's very important to keep in mind. But a big item here, you've heard me talk about this on previous dollars and cents shows, and it has to do with the challenges in the automobile market. right now. I'm actually going to bring up a couple of data points here as we're talking about the automobile market overall, and then with a couple of companies. They're going through some real challenges right now in the automobile market. I'm going to start with the macro, though, not with company specific, but some data that came out from Cox Research looking at car repossessions. So generally speaking, if you miss 3 consecutive payments on an auto loan, generally speaking, you're at risk that the car is going to be repossessed by the bank or by a repossession company. And those incidents of repossession have increased just in the last year a little over 23%. 23% increase in car repossessions in a little over a year. Now, it would be inappropriate for me to look at any singular data point as to why that would be the case. However, when we put these kinds of data points together, all-time high in terms of the cost of vehicles, and we're talking both new and used, significant cost increases across the board in the last 5 years, especially during COVID and after COVID. Because if you recall, during COVID, it was hard to find some vehicles. I mean, you would go to some car dealer lots, and because of the restrictions from COVID that manufacturers were not producing as many vehicles, there were a lot of times you went to car dealer lots, and these were even the big ones, not just the smaller ones, but the big ones. You couldn't find certain models, and in some cases they looked, there were some empty spots on the lot, and it was impossible to get some vehicles. So that really escalated the cost. But we had instances, you may not recall this. I worked with this with clients a number of times where folks were paying over asking price for a car because the demand was so high, meaning above sticker. You don't see that too often, but that was happening during that time. Now we're kind of catching the other end of the sword on this end of things. Now we're catching because of higher interest rates. So if you have applied for an auto loan recently, you know exactly what I'm going to say next. I mean, instead of having 0, 1.9, 2.9, now we're talking 6.9, 7.9, and even double digits, 10 and 11% for some used car loans that are sitting out there. So much more expensive to have an automobile loan at this time if you have originated here in the last couple of years. Also, again, coupling that with a larger cost to the car, you're talking about significantly higher monthly payments if you have an auto loan. I'm not saying that's the only reason why we've had an increase in repossessions, but I dare say it's a significant factor in that. And so we've seen now these car repossessions increasing by over 23% just in a year. That's notable. That says something about the consumer. Again, I'm not going to extrapolate more than that. You know I don't get wired up on single data points because there's danger in that. You can skew it one way or the other pretty easily. But that is a notable data point that we're going to revisit, especially in light of, as I mentioned, the increases in car costs, both new and used, and the significantly higher cost of capital for taking out car loans that we have in place now. We're going to be watching that. We're going to watch specifically what it means for the consumer. Now, let me go ahead and pivot on that into talking about a couple of the larger automobile manufacturers that are out there. And again, not particularly, I'm going to say positive, not positive. Let's start Tesla, right? Tesla probably one of the most well-known car manufacturers out there right now. Ticker symbol Tom Sam, Larry Alpha, not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Tesla. Profit went down 45% in this most recent quarter when looking at it year over year. That's huge. Now, is that speaking doom for Tesla? No, those kinds of things happen. They had some one-off expenses, all that goes along with that. But buried in that data was concern about the number of units that Tesla has been moving, meaning the number of cars that are being sold. And that's going to be true with another car manufacturer, especially on the EV, the electrical vehicle end of things I'm going to talk about after the break here. But in looking at Tesla, they have been dominant in that EV market, in that more niche kind of market. They have absolutely been dominant. I would say, it's a unique buyer of those kinds of vehicles, and they've been slowing down in terms of what they're willing to pay for those vehicles. So we couple that up with what we're seeing in terms of the repossession end of things. It's, again, just a couple of data points, but it's something important to keep in mind when we're thinking about the strength of the consumer. And as you know, that is hyper important. All right, we're going to take a break here as we hear from our sponsors once again. Thanks for listening here to Dollars and Cents. Hang with us for a couple of moments here on WSIC.
There's more of Dollars and Cents with certified financial planner Joshua Dobi on the way from 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Well, it's been a bit of a soggy day across the Lake Norman area. Rain tapering off and drying out as we go into this evening. We're mainly dry but damp, warm and muggy, low to mid-70s in the overnight hours. Going into our Friday, we'll start out dry, temperatures back in the low and mid-80s, and our rain chance gets lower for only an isolated shower or pop-up thunderstorm. Weekend looking to be in good shape, mainly dry Saturday and Sunday with highs in the mid-80s. That's your forecast from the WSIC Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Chase Myers.
Prioritizing your health is one of the best ways to take care of yourself. From routine visits to the joys of pregnancy to the illnesses that stop you in your tracks, Iredell Health System will be by your side. Learn more at iredellhealth.org.
Parents can find a quality classical Christian education at Headwaters Academy. For more information, the phone number is 704-876-1520.
Hi, this is Bob McIntosh with the McIntosh Law Firm in Davidson. Since 1997, we have been committed to providing our clients with competent, caring, and experienced legal services. Learn more at McIntoshLawFirm.com.
The school year may have ended, but WSIC's Teacher of the Month contest is still in session. Head to WSICnews.com to vote for your favorite teacher. Winners receive prizes from Nina's Boutique and Brighter Smiles.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Just minutes to go ahead of Wall Street's closing bell, and stocks are on track to end the day mostly higher, losing some early steam after the U.S. economy grew at a far higher than expected rate of 2.8% in the spring second quarter. That's thanks in large part to a rise in personal and business spending. Right now, the Dow is up about 2/3 of 1%. The NASDAQ is flat. The S&P up just a small fraction. The big decliner shares of Ford Motors down 18% after saying warranty costs to repair older models put a huge dent in its profits last quarter. Meantime, shares of Stellantis, that's the owner of Jeep, Dodge, Fiat, Ram trucks, and other makes, well, they're down 7% after weak sales slashed its first half profits in half. And shares of the San Diego-based drug maker Viking Therapeutics soaring up 34% after announcing a late-stage trial of its weight loss shot to take on Ozempic. It's also working on an obesity pill. Tom Busby, Bloomberg Radio.
It's Dollars and Cents with certified financial planner Joshua Dobi on 105.9 100.7 WSIC.
Hello and welcome back to Dollars and Cents presented by North Main Financial. I'm your host, Joshua Dobi. Thank you so much. Hanging with us here, second half, 27 minutes. I literally got it right at the minute change there. 27 minutes if you're a 9 to 5 or getting to that 5 o'clock hour. I appreciate so much you spending time with us here as we're giving some thought to, and perhaps like we're talking about here, getting into some of the minutia. I'm trying to make it interesting. I know some of this data sometimes makes us all glossy-eyed, makes me glossy-eyed too, but it's important stuff for us to know because it impacts us on a day-to-day. We were talking about airlines earlier, airlines that are shifting up the way that they're doing things that impacts you. If you're one who takes those airlines, we're talking cars now. Talk Tesla, talked about how they're feeling it in a negative way, fewer units, smaller margins on the number of cars that they're selling, Cybertruck not selling in the ways that they initially thought that it would. And I'm going to bring another one to the mix. And I don't like pouring on the negative data, but I got to share this kind of stuff with you because, again, it speaks to the consumer. We're going to talk about that here a little bit later on in the show with where the consumer is right now. But I got to talk Ford. Ford also has one of those single-letter ticker symbols. F is in Frank, not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Ford. Boy, they came out with some, I'm going to call it discouraging data, discouraging reports for their quarterly reports. Stock got hammered. It was down over 10% as they were going through the report, and they were just very uninspiring. It's about as positive as I can make it, and in terms of sales and in terms of the margins on sales. So fewer units being sold, and of those units being sold, smaller margins. And that's not good for business, folks, when you're going in that kind of direction. A big part of it, that's why I'm tying it in with Tesla here, a big part of it, their EV end of things, Ford's EV, their electrical vehicle end of things. Ford has spent billions in converting some of their very large manufacturing facilities over to sometimes exclusively producing EVs or having the capability to produce EVs along the standard internal combustion engines, and they're losing. The biggest model at this point that's suffering for Ford, the F-150. on their EV end of things. Batteries not able to keep up, not working well in the cold, not working well with very heavy loads. Well, folks, when you buy a Ford F-150, if you're familiar with them at all, generally speaking, you're going to be using them in harsh conditions and probably pulling or carrying heavy weights and heavy loads. So challenging. I mean, it's easy for me to sit on the sidelines, with a bag of popcorn and to throw darts, but it really is challenging. So what does that mean? What does that mean for the EV market? I don't know at this point. I'm not saying it's going away. I'm not saying that at all. But there has been a hyper premium for some of these cars, especially Tesla, having a hyper premium in terms of pricing. And so now we have an increase really a decrease in the demand aspect of things, along with an increase in the rates for car loans, just like we were talking about here just before the break. You put those kinds of things together, that's going to put a crimp on earnings, and that's what these companies are seeing here. All right, we're going to keep going earnings season. I'm going to pivot out of the automobiles. I feel like I was going heavy industrial there, going with the airlines, with the cars. Going to go to the tech end of things. Hard not to talk about tech in this market, but I'm going to come out again. I feel like I keep going negative here. Got to talk about it though. Google, and I really should say I listened to Google's quarterly earnings call with their C-suite folks and talking about where things are. Frankly, and this is not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Google. Google is George, Oscar, Oscar, George for the C shares. It is George, Oscar, Oscar, George, Larry for their A shares, meaning there are a couple of different classes of stock that you can buy in Google. Again, not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold them, but I was not concerned by what I heard in the quarterly earnings call, but right now, so much in the tech market, you've heard me say this now for several months, so much in the tech market is priced for perfection, meaning that the prices that have escalated in a positive way, good if you own Google, right? Good if you own Amazon, Apple, Meta, NVIDIA, certainly in that mix of things. Great if you had owned it before and were able to ride that up, but those prices in many instances were just absolutely needing to have perfection, maybe even above perfection if that's possible, in order to sustain those prices. I think that's what we're seeing with Google a little bit. Their earnings were above expectations, margins above expectations, top line revenues above expectations, all that good. That's what you want from your company as an investor. But the stock still took it on the nose. And so I think that's part of that in this kind of market with where the mega cap technology companies are right now. That's the kind of stuff that can happen. It can happen that when you're just priced too much, you've gone up too much, too fast, almost parabolic kind of move in the positive direction, you're going to have a breather at some point. It has to happen. And we're actually starting to see that across the tech sector here over the last couple of weeks. And we've been talking about it for a long time. I don't want to say this was an I told you so moment, because I probably only been talking about it for about 7 or 8 months at this point. And it still may not be happening. But we have seen here over the last couple of weeks that some of the highest flyers have started to take a little bit of a breather. Google coming out with their quarterly earnings again. Not bad, but still the stock price taking it on the chin a little bit here and pulling back. All right, let's pivot to the consumer. And this comes in our what to know segment. What to know segment here is when things that should be relevant to most of us in the listening audience here. Meaning, what are those things that may be part of our day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year kind of activity? And I want to talk about the Federal Reserve for a moment. You may say, well, what does the Federal Reserve have to do with me? Fair question. They're probably not the kind of folks you're going to see on your television screens, or hopefully you're not reading too much of their reports, because their reports are, let me say, not exciting when you're reading through them. They're long and they're written by a very intelligent group of lawyers, but it's in lawyer speak, so it's not exactly a good novel to read. But there's very important stuff in there. So, but when I'm talking about the Federal Reserve, I'm going to talk about them in a couple contexts here. First one is, and this is important, over the last couple of weeks, I've heard more from Federal Reserve Board governors indicating that they might be open to, including from the board chair himself, Jerome Powell, that they might be open to a rate cut here sooner rather than later. Folks, I think that's surprising. I don't think we're in a space, I don't think the data supports that. This is just my commentary here, subjective look at things. I don't think the data supports that, We've just come out of a raising cycle, an historically large and fast raising cycle. In my opinion, we should be 6 to 12 months out before we're talking about, meaning 6 to 12 months out additionally, because of how fast we move before we're talking about cutting rates, especially when we don't have significant geopolitical or macroeconomic factors that would indicate that we should, but I'm hearing it. And so I got to share that with you, because if you haven't heard that, that's what's sitting out there. There's probably, especially according to the futures market now, higher probability for at least a single rate cut, probably right around 25 basis points, 1/4% before the end of the year now. So I got to share that with you. But in doing that, I really want to talk about the consumer. So you've heard me say some negative things with regards to what the automobile industry is seeing right now. Also, some additional data out with regards to credit card delinquencies right now, higher balances. You've heard me talk about that on previous dollars and cents shows here, and then higher levels of delinquency, meaning not only that the balances are higher, but that folks aren't making their minimum payments on those kinds of things. Got to raise that have some concern about the consumer overall. Now, what's counterbalancing that is that unemployment still on a relative basis is unbelievably low. Ticked up a little bit, popped through the 4% end of things, but folks, 4% is full employment in an economy of our size. That's unbelievably tight in terms of the number of folks who are looking and the number of jobs that are available. With an economy of our size, being closer to 6, I know it sounds just terrible, but actually being closer to 6 is actually a very normal and healthy kind of space in terms of an unemployment rate. Right now we're at 4. So it's ticked up a little bit, but what's counterbalanced some of that slowdown in consumer spending and some challenges that consumer has is that unemployment still continues to be very, very strong. So that's balancing that a little bit, if you will. I think that's why we haven't seen it in GDP or pullback at this point. So you heard me say this is what to know. So what's this mean? Well, I'm bringing it up because I'm talking about where rates are right now. And if the Federal Reserve Board cuts rates, what does that mean for you? It's a great question. We get it all the time, because we talk very casually, at least I talk very casually, about the Federal Reserve Board cutting rates and think, okay, the rates are going to come down. There's actually not a one-to-one comparison with that, though. When the Federal Reserve Board cuts rates, what they're talking about are the rates that they charge to member banks, meaning the rates that banks pay to the Federal Reserve to borrow money. Often on an overnight basis, that's usually the rate that's quoted, but it could be longer. It could be 30 days, could be 60 days, could be 90 days. That's how banks fund themselves in significant ways to be able to lend funds out to the public. Not always. They can use deposits as well, but they can also borrow from the Federal Reserve in order to then lend that money out, make a margin, make a profit, pay back the Federal Reserve, and they keep the net. So that it's important, because if the Federal Reserve does cut rates, it's important to know, first, there's not a one-to-one comparison that any rate that you're paying right now is going to adjust. Let me say that again. If the Federal Reserve cuts rates, it does not mean that any of the rates that you're paying right now are going to go down. It's not a one-to-one comparison. It probably will have some impact on your variable rate kinds of things, say credit cards, lines of credit, other rates which adjust based upon where overall rates are in the market right now. But it's not a one-to-one comparison. It doesn't mean that because the Federal Reserve Board cuts by a 1/4 point that your rates are going to reduce by a 1/4 point. There are several other variables in the algorithm there. They're different for every lender and every situation, so I'm not going to get into what that algorithm may be. It's just important to understand there's not a one-to-one comparison. They are related, but it's not one-to-one. So when we're looking at those kinds of things, folks say, well, if the Fed cuts rates, then mortgage rates are going to come down. Maybe, maybe not. And if they do, again, it won't be a one-to-one, meaning it won't come down a 1/4 point just because the Federal Reserve cuts the overnight lending rate by a 1/4 point. Very, very important to keep that kind of thing in mind, especially when you are anticipating that some of those things may impact you from a financial standpoint, right? Because if we look at mortgages, you got a fixed rate on mortgage, you got a fixed rate on your car loan. Those aren't adjusting. You agreed to that up front. If those are fixed rates, it really doesn't matter what the Federal Reserve does. You're still going to continue to pay that rate. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind. And I want to make sure you're aware of that, because we're going to keep talking about the Federal Reserve possibly cutting rates here in the relative near term. But I just want you to be aware for your particular space, it may or may not affect you. And if it does, it's not going to be a one-to-one comparison. Hopefully I didn't make the waters more confusing by saying that. But I think it's important to understand what that relationship is so that you can make good planning thoughts on your end of things. Well, we're going to take a few seconds here to hear from our sponsors here once again as we get ready for the fourth quarter here on Dollars and Cents presented by North Main Financial. Appreciate so much you're hanging with us. Stay with us for a few minutes longer as we come back here on WSIC.
Dollars and Cents with your host, certified financial planner Joshua Dobi, continues straight ahead on 105.9, 100.7 WSIC.
Well, it's been a bit of a soggy day across the Lake Norman area. Rain tapering off and drying out as we go into this evening. We're mainly dry but damp, warm and muggy, low to mid-70s in the overnight hours. Going into our Friday, we'll start out dry, temperatures back in the low and mid-80s, and our rain chance gets lower for only an isolated shower or pop-up thunderstorm. Weekend looking to be in good shape, mainly dry Saturday and Sunday with highs in the mid-80s. That's your forecast from the WSIC Weather Center. I'm meteorologist Chase Myers.
Here is your WSIC community calendar. Langtree Live continues their free music series on Thursday. 2 months ago, Ghostface Brewing and Waves Entertainment hosted the Battle of the Bands. The champion that night, Fortune 5, makes their Langtree Live debut this Thursday, July 25th. Come on out to Langtree Lake Norman to see and hear the Battle of the Bands champion, Fortune 5, this Thursday with music beginning at 7 p.m. The Live Under the Oaks concert series continues on Friday at Birkdale Village in Huntersville. Come enjoy the music of the Highway with their dynamic and high-energy show. Red Rocks will have beverages on site, and the Birkdale restaurants are ready for your dinner service. Bring your chairs and blankets for the Highway concert at Birkdale Village on Friday, beginning at 6 p.m. The 8th annual Dog Island Jam takes place this Saturday on Lake Norman. Star from The Voice, John Sullivan presents the summer's must-see concert. Waves Entertainment will bring a stage, sound system, and LED walls to, you guessed it, an island on Lake Norman. Sully and Friends headline the concert on Saturday. Untie your boat or call your friends with boats and enjoy the Dog Island Jam concert on Lake Norman this Saturday. The Cookout Summer Shootout Series at Charlotte Motor Speedway reaches the series finale. The 10-race series title night is on Tuesday, July 30th, with NASCAR night sponsored by the NASCAR Hall of Fame. See the champions crowned and the legends and bandoleros. Don't miss the next generation of racing superstars honing their skills and rising through the ranks. Gates open at 5 p.m. with the green flag waving at 6. Visit charlottemotorspeedway.com for tickets, details, and information. To keep up with all the events happening around the community and much more, including amazing local deals, download the WSIC News app today.
Dollars and Cents continues now. Here's your host, certified financial planner Joshua Dobi on 105.9, 100.7 WSIC.
Hello and welcome back to Dollars and Cents presented by North Main Financial. I'm your host, Joshua Dobi. Thank you so much for hanging with us here. Fourth quarter, 12 minutes. I got you right at the top of the minute there. 12 minutes until we get to that 5 o'clock bell. Appreciate so much you hanging with us here as we talk about all things financial, economic. And we hopefully I didn't lose you there in the last segment. I know, talking about the Federal Reserve movements, not exactly the kind of riveting conversation you probably want to share around the dinner table or at cocktail hour, but it impacts us. It does. And I think really the most important thing that you want to remember with regards to whether the Federal Reserve is increasing rates or decreasing rates, yes, there is a correlation. There's a relationship between what banks pay in terms of deposits and CDs and those kinds of things. It also affects mortgages and car loans and all of those kinds of things, but it's not one-to-one. So very, very important. I mean, and I'll say this from this standpoint, rates have risen significantly here over the last 2 years. There are still tons of savings accounts out there. I see them every week. Tons of savings accounts out there that are still paying 0.1, 0.2% interest. So they don't raise the rates automatically. Very, very important to understand that correlation, understand what may be relevant for you. But I appreciate you so much. You're hanging with us here into the fourth quarter of this week's version of Dollars and Cents. I'm going to start out with a number here in the fourth quarter segment. And yeah, I'm going to talk markets. I promise you. I know I save it till the end. Got to keep you around for that kind of stuff, right? But I'll start out with a number here. It's actually a dollar figure, $2,278, $2,278. And this is as reported by the Wall Street Journal. It is the average cost for a year's worth, full coverage cost for auto insurance. So roughly $200 a month, $2,300 a year, average full coverage cost for auto insurance. A couple of reasons why that was brought out. First, That's a 12% increase in 1 year, meaning for the average. Now, there are folks who are going to pay more, there are folks who are going to pay less for any number of reasons. Not going to get into the differentials on that. But the average that folks are paying for full coverage on automobile insurance has increased about 12% in 1 year. Folks, that's huge. Because for all of us who have cars, I shouldn't say that. For most of us who have cars, there is a need to insure them if we're using them on a consistent basis, and certainly for the liability end of things. And so that kind of cost impacts us on a budgetary level, a monthly budget or annual budget kind of level, very, very specifically. Comes back to consumer additional expense that we're talking about there. The primary reason that was cited in the Wall Street Journal is something that I found. I didn't find it interesting. I didn't anticipate the primary reason that they were going to highlight. The primary reason that was highlighted for the cost increase, this 12% cost increase on average here for automobile insurance year over year, was because of the number of folks who are opting not to carry automobile insurance. And so the pool, the insurance pool, the number of folks who have insurance, who are paying into their respective insurance companies, is shrinking. So as a result, the insurance companies are needing to charge more to those folks who are maintaining insurance. That's how insurance works. Everybody pays into a pool, and the insurance company works very hard to make sure that only a little bit of that pool is paid out each year so that they can continue to be a viable entity and to offer insurance to other folks. But there's a significant spike up in the number of uninsured drivers. And most policies will have some amount of coverage. Your auto policy may have this, where it has coverage for uninsured drivers, meaning if you're in an accident with an uninsured driver, that your policy may have some coverage available for that, but it may or may not. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind. Also important to be aware of that as well. More and more folks who are opting, which in most cases, at least there are usually some state minimums that you need to carry in most states when it comes to automobile insurance. And so in some cases that can be illegal not to have insurance of any kind. So very, very important to keep that kind of thing in mind. Interesting, again, the amount of increase, interesting, not in a good way. And how much that increase has been year over year, because again, that impacts the consumer. Big deal. All right, let's pivot to the markets here. I promised you we'd get here in doing this. Interesting movements, folks, over these last couple of weeks. I know I say that every week. To me, it's wonderfully interesting. You may or may not think that, unless your particular holdings or investments are affected in a positive or negative way with any significance. But what we've seen here now over the last couple of weeks, we've started to see some, I guess I can call it a correction. I really can't at this point. With certain stocks, there has been a correction level. Correction being 10% or more off of the high in a negative direction. Definitely with some of the stocks, we have seen that in the technology sector, where some of that parabolic positive movement is starting to cool off a little bit. Now, how long does it last? I have no idea. Of course, there's not a way for us to tell with any significance, but it is interesting because there really hasn't been a particular catalyst, at least not that I've seen, to which we can point to say, oh, well, that's the reason why the technology sector is slowing down. Because frankly, the earnings reports for the large cap technology companies, not perfectly across the board, but for most of them, pretty positive. So it's not like we're getting, negative earnings reports or price target revisions in a negative way or anything like that sometimes can affect how we think about a company's fortunes in a go forward kind of way. But we haven't seen that, but we're still starting to see a cool off. So that would indicate to me, on my end of things, subjective analysis coming up here, that it's more of what's called a technical sell-off or a technical pullback. Again, not much at this point. We're talking 3, 5. Some companies have pulled back 10%. But a technical pullback is more not about the fundamentals of the company. That would be more fundamental pullback, but technical based more on price analysis, meaning the price of the stock, how much it has increased, what its price is in relationship to future earnings expectations, margin expectations, and then calculating that into what the proper current price for a share of that particular company's stock should be. So that's what this looks like to me. This looks like more of a technical. Things have gone up. Forgive my casualness here. Things have gone up for a long time. Let's sell some because things have gone up for a long time. And so we saw a little bit of our winners. That's what this feels like at this point. We're going to continue to watch it. We're going to continue to stuff data points next to this to see if this is indeed a trend. that we may be seeing here, where we're getting a little bit more of a moderation, a cycling, if you will, maybe moving more out of the more capital appreciation, growth-oriented ends of the investing universe, perhaps more into value. We've seen that a little bit here over the last couple of weeks, where the money that's been coming out of these high flyers on the tech, the more aggressive end, let's call them NASDAQ related, for the most part, companies, we have seen some rotation actually into more value oriented things. I'm looking at you, oil and energy. I'm looking at you, pharmaceuticals. I'm looking at you, financials. That tends to be more in the value end of the universe. And we've seen that, which is kind of interesting because there are a whole bunch of implications, a whole bunch of variables in the algorithm for what that could mean. I'm not speculating the reason why that may be the case, but one of the macros that historically has been true with that is that it's not because then that the investing public is doing that, not because of a fear or a concern about the overall market, but really more of looking for opportunity. Now, again, we're talking a couple of weeks, so I'm not going to extrapolate too much on that. Again, nothing of significance from either a macroeconomic or geopolitical standpoint that would indicate why that may be happening. This may be just folks taking a breather, and the market taking a breather a little bit and selling some of its winners and trying to find some things that have a little bit, according to valuation, a little bit more opportunity ahead of them. So we'll see if that continues to be the case. Again, earnings-wise, can't say that there's a whole lot negative out there on the big tech end of things at this point, but I do understand that from a valuation, from a technical standpoint, as much as, especially if you own it, as much as I would love for it to go straight up forever, just not going to do that. All right, so I know it's first time you've ever heard that kind of thing. Except this sidebar here, you've heard me say this many times here on Dollars and Cents, but it's real. When things go up, we just think they're going to go up forever. And don't tell me that you don't, because I see the money flows into the markets. I see where the most intense money flows go in the markets, and the maximum amount of money going into the winners happens at the top every single time. I'm not making that up. Check me on any data point there. You want to check NVIDIA? By the way, NVIDIA, NVDA, Nancy, Victor, David, Aaron on that, not a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold, but you look at the parabolic move that they made, the maximum number of dollars coming in to buy that stock, the most buying intensity is after it has gone up the most. Trust me on it, you can, or absolutely check me on it as well, because it absolutely holds true. Wherever the folks who were buying that 8 years ago, that's what I want to talk to. I want to talk to those folks who were doing that when nobody knew what those kinds of companies were. So what does that mean in a go-forward kind of way? Getting a lot of questions on this. Obviously, a lot has happened here over the last couple of weeks from a political standpoint, and this is not a political show, so I didn't really touch on any of those developments because we really do hyper-focus on things financial and economic here, but it's important for us to at least mention some of the dynamics that have changed here with regards to the presidential race. And I don't need to tell you what it is. I can't imagine that you haven't seen at this point, but there's been a changeover. At least at this point, I have to say it appears that there's a changeover because there's actually a process. The Democratic Party has not yet gone to convention, so this has not become official yet, but it appears that they're going to change candidates. That instead of the incumbent president, Joe Biden, being their candidate, that the current incumbent vice president, Kamala Harris, is going to be their candidate. So that's noteworthy. What does it mean from an economic and financial standpoint? Not being at all disrespectful to any of those folks or any other folks in office, not really anything. And you don't have to believe me. Look at it historically. There really isn't a whole lot of differential that happens there, but it is noteworthy from that standpoint. So, and I say that's noteworthy in a go-forward kind of way in terms of what we're looking at for the balance of the year, because we're probably going to have some noise, additional noise in the system. Not probably, I'll guarantee it. I'm not even allowed to say that mostly, but I can guarantee there's going to be more noise in the system between here, the election, the end of the year, all that goes along with that. It's kind of the nature of where we are right now. But so I would anticipate there's going to be more volatility. We may be getting into a technical correction here with regards especially to the more aggressive end of the technology market, and noting that some of the high flyers are starting to cool off here a little bit. We may be getting into that. Frankly, from where I sit, I wouldn't mind that at all. I really would. Not that I want things to go down for you, for me, or for anybody else, but we need to have some moderation and some reasonableness in the market as well. And just like things don't go down forever, whenever we're in a negative market, they're not going to go up forever either. So we need to have that in order to have a healthy market, have that a little bit more cyclicality associated with it. And we'll be watching to that to see if that's going to happen here. All right, friends. Well, we're rapidly approaching the end of this week's version of Dollars and Cents. Let's do a lightning fast recap here. Talking cars, not so positive right now. Some adjustments at some well-known airline carriers that are sitting out there as well. Costco memberships increasing. Most importantly, though, cost of that hot dog staying at $1.50. I appreciate so much, folks. You hanging with us here on this week's version of Dollars and Cents. Make sure to tune in next week, Thursday at 4 o'clock here on WSIC.
Serving you better than ever before.